Hello! I told you back in the winter time when I did a range test of the General Electric 3-5979C CB radio that when the weather got warm again I would do another range test. And so today it's nice and warm, it's clear with just a few clouds. I'm going to be doing that again. So here's what's going to be different from last time. I now have the Radio Shack TRC-502 set up outside. It is hooked up to my Newmar linear 12-volt power supply, and the antenna, Mom actually let me put it on the roof of the car, and I have a towel in between the magnet of the antenna and the roof of the car. And instead of having the other video camera set up, I just have the Olympus LS7 here because it's useless to have a video camera pointing at this thing, you just need the audio. Now as for my end, here's the General Electric. You can see I have my book bag here. Inside my book bag is my jumper pack. And plugged into the cigarette lighter of my jumper pack is an adapter which I'm going to plug into this radio. The reason for that is the batteries that I used with this radio, apparently I used them enough that it wore them down, so their combined voltage is only like 11.8 volts, and that's when you're not transmitting. So I'm going to be using the jumper pack instead, which when I'm not transmitting, the voltage will be around 12.4 volts. When I am transmitting on high power, it drops to about 12 volts, so that's a bit better. Ideally, I'd have this plugged into a car and we'd drive out the road that I'm going to be walking down, because the car would keep the voltage at around 14 volts with the engine running, but that's not happening, so this will have to do. More realistic anyway, better emulation of batteries. So yeah, I'm going to be walking with this thing on my back and the radio plugged in and this cord going over my shoulder like some sort of terrible appendix. And yeah, I'm going to be walking out. I have the Garmin eTrex Venture HC GPS, and I'm going to do the test just like last time. I'm going to start at 500 meters, then 750, then a kilometer, and go from there. And hopefully, because the radio is actually set up outside and it's somewhat grounded on the roof of a car, we'll get some longer range. And of course, the antenna's within line of sight now without a wall in the way. So hopefully this works out good, and let's get started. I should also note that I'm using a different channel this time. Last time I think I used channel 22 or 23. This time I'm using 25. You may remember in the last video that I'm not sure because I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounds like I pissed off some locals who are also on the channel, which I wasn't aware of because I couldn't hear them on this radio, but in the video you could hear them on that radio. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So I'm using channel 25. Let's do a preliminary test. This is a preliminary test on channel 25. And I think that worked okay. So let's get started. Make that channel 26. I heard some distant speech on 25, but 26 is clear as of right now. Alright, let's go. Beautiful day out, nice and warm, quite windy, cold wind. Feels nice. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt. All the snow's gone. Beautiful. Well, I did the 500 meter test, and afterwards I heard one of them big talkers from down in the States making crazy whirring noises with some electronic thing. Such a problem, despite the fact that hardly anybody genuinely uses CB radio anymore. Almost all the channels are just crowded with noise because of all these big talkers buying these huge multi-thousand watt amplifiers only to broadcast jabber and crazy electronic sounds. You get the occasional person who's responsible if he buys a modified radio and a crazy powerful amplifier, but most of them are just up to no good and it's pointless. And that's why everybody switches to amateur radio, which I would like to get my license someday. Another good look at the highway here. This is a new highway. They just finished building it a couple years ago. And you probably can't hear me because of the wind. But yeah, they built this highway to replace an old one, and they rebuilt the old one with it. But as nice as this highway is, I think it was useless for building it. I think it was a waste of money that we don't have. Because the old highway was just fine. They built it to make travel faster. But nobody's in a hurry. But yeah, and it made the old highway much more confusing now because it has a bunch of new turnoffs and stuff. But oh well. Nice thing about this highway is it runs right near my house. But it's far enough away that it isn't like noisy. You can't hear cars on it inside the house. But yeah, nice place. Nice to come up here and look at. I probably look like some sort of explorer if anybody's looking up here. But unnecessary spend of money. And somebody just blasted by on the road I'm walking. It's the first car I've seen out here since last year. Anyhow, time to do the 750 meter test. Those big talkers are still babbling away. I hope they're not taking over my voice on the other radio back at the house. This always happens. I came to a cool little brook here, 1.36 kilometers away. I'm thinking instead of going to 1.5 kilometers, I'm just gonna skip right to 1.6, because that's 1 mile, if I remember correctly. Well, that was quite impressive. That was quite an improvement over last time. Last time I was only heard up to 0.6 miles. This time I was heard up to 1 mile, and it sounds like I probably could have gone farther and still could have been heard. So yeah, I'm quite impressed. That being said though, it's unfortunate that I must end this video on a sad note. Something catastrophic has happened to this radio. And it was an accident, and it was my fault. That day, after, it was 3 weeks ago I filmed that. That day after I came home after making the test, and I listened to the recording, and I'm like, oh yeah, that worked great. And I thought, oh, for the heck of it, I should find out, you know, how much current this draws, find out how much wattage it actually uses on all 3 of the power levels. And how I decided to do that was pretty simple. I have this thing here, just bare wires, and then on the ends 3 cigarette lighter jacks. Just wire this up to my 12 volt power supply with my multimeter in series to monitor the current, and then plug an adapter up to this, which would then plug into the power adapter jack. Pretty simple. Well, I did that, and it worked just fine. And but when I transmitted, my multimeter was given really crazy current readings that were totally wrong. And I thought, well, it must be because I'm on a power supply, even though it was a linear power supply. Sometimes they can still make things a little weird with multimeters, and the fact that it's a radio that I'm testing doesn't help either. So I thought, well, I'll do the same thing, except I'll use my jumper pack that has an actual 12-volt battery in it. I'll just hook that up to the jumper leads of the jumper pack and try it out that way. Well, when I went to do that, that's where things went terribly wrong. Now what I'm about to say will give probably most of you an idea of what went wrong. As you can see, this thing doesn't give very good indication of which wire is negative and which wire is positive. Now I do know which wire is negative and positive. You might be able to see one of these wires, the upper one in the shot here, has writing on it. That's the positive wire. I checked and I double checked and I triple checked and I checked again and again, as I always do, to make sure I do things right. I hooked this up backwards. The radio was plugged into it. I turned the radio on and it blew up. The term blow up is probably more of a hyperbole because this thing actually still works. It not only survived, but it still transmits and it still works perfectly. However, the speaker has now gone absolutely silent. There is no audio output whatsoever. The display works, the transmission works, but it is absolutely silent now. There's not a pop or a click or a fizz or anything from the speaker now. You turn this thing on, it used to make a popping sound when you turned it on. You don't even get that anymore. This thing has gone absolutely silent. And I've kicked myself, and I'm still kicking myself. Not only because this is a new old stock radio, you know, this radio's almost 20 years old, and I got it brand new in the package. But if this was something I bought myself, I wouldn't be kicking myself so hard, but this was a Christmas gift from my mother, of all people. And for that reason, I am very, very upset that I've accidentally done this. Now that being said, there's a couple of things that I could go about trying to rectify this. It's quite possible, as a best case scenario, all that's gone wrong is that a diode has gone open. The reverse voltage overstressed the diode. One of the failure modes of a diode is to go open, so that diode opened up and of course cut off power to the audio circuitry. That would be a simple fix, solder a new diode in it. But another possibility is that, now I have been inside this thing and I haven't looked enough to see if the audio circuitry is discrete or if more likely it's provided by an IC, a chip. And if it is a chip that provides the audio output, and I can't find a bad diode, then it's possible that the entire chip that provides the audio output has blown. And that's probably curtains for this thing in that case, because it's quite possible that it's a proprietary chip. If it is a standard chip, which I suppose that's just as possible, I don't know how good of a job I could do desoldering it and soldering on a new chip without breaking anything else. I would definitely need to invest in a desoldering tool in that case. And then finally, probably the most likely way I will fix this thing, if I decide to do it at all, is go on eBay and buy the cheapest, crappiest one of these I can find. One that's in the worst shape, just as long as it works perfect. I don't care if it's beaten all the heck, or if it's missing an antenna, or missing buttons, or anything. Just as long as it, you know, as long as it gets audio output, and everything else presumably works. Buy the cheapest, crappiest one of these I can find, take the guts out of it, and put the guts into this case. And then finally, the last thing I could do, if all else fails, is just sell this thing, get whatever money I can for it, and I don't know, maybe or maybe not buy another handheld radio, maybe another one of these, or maybe one of a Radio Shack brand or something, I don't know. But in any case, yeah, this thing still turns on and works. I don't have batteries in it to show you, but I could put batteries in it or plug it into power and turn it on and show you that it works just fine. But there's absolutely no reception, no audio output whatsoever. And for that, I am very sad.